Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Megan Collins. Megan is the author of Thicker Than Water, The Family Plot, Behind the Red Door, and The Winter Sister. She taught creative writing for many years at both the high school and college level and is the managing editor of Three Elements Literary Review. She lives in Connecticut, where she obsesses over dogs, miniatures, and cake. We're going to have to unpack that, Megan. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I was just telling Megan that I'm just back from Ireland and Scotland, and I actually read Megan's book in Ireland, which is appropriate because she's Irish, or her origins are Irish, and how much I loved Ireland and how much I love this book. So before we dig into all sorts of things about it that I loved, can you tell our listeners a little about Thicker Than Water?
Yeah, so Thicker Than Water is about two best friends and sisters-in-law who have been best friends pretty much since the second they met. And they believe that they have this completely unbreakable bond. They're not only best friends, not only sisters-in-law, but they're business partners too. So they think nothing can come between them. And then one night they find out that the man who connects them, the husband of one, the brother of the other, has gotten into a car accident. And they've now placed him into a medically induced coma. And then while they're at the hospital over the next couple of days, the police show up because in the course of that car accident, they discovered evidence in his car that connects him to the murder, this really brutal murder of his boss. And so now he is sort of the prime suspect. And these two women are like, no, that's impossible. Like, he obviously can't defend himself because he's in this coma. So we're going to clear his name so that when he gets out, he's not arrested. And so the more that they dig into it, the more things they uncover, the more their opinions on his innocence start to diverge, where one is still more sure than ever that with everything they're finding out, he's totally innocent, while the other is not so sure anymore. And obviously that causes big tension, big rifts that they've never experienced before.
Right. And so that is so fun because you can absolutely see they both love him, but there are definitely parts that suggest he was involved. So that is really fun. Can you tell us the inspiration? Do you remember the sort of where the story originated and what it came from? And I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So it started with my agent on Twitter one day. She was just doing like kind of a random manuscript wish list type tweet where she just said she'd love to see a sister-in-law thriller. And I was like, oh, I wonder what that means, a sister-in-law thriller. I don't even know if she knew for sure, but that was something that she wanted. And so I was in the middle of another book that I was contracted on, but when it came time to start thinking of a new thing, that was still in my head, and I wanted to like be the bestest, most favorite client and get all the gold stars and create the thing that she wanted so badly.
I love it.
And so I started to think, okay, like what is that to me? And my books, the three before this one, always have a very dysfunctional family at the center of it. And so my mind immediately went to that place. It was like, okay, these two sisters-in-law, they're at each other's throats all the time. And they've even tried to sabotage the other's relationship with the man who connects them. But then he gets murdered and they're the prime suspects and they have to work together to clear their names, which is still like a premise that I think is really fun. But it was too like in the same vein of things I'd already done, of where there's this toxic relationship from the very start. And the book is about trying to see if there's a way to turn that healthy or if you let go of it forever. So I thought I should challenge myself and try to start from the other direction of, no, they are totally close. They think there's nothing dysfunctional about them at all. And then it's only through this thing that happens that they start to see there have been cracks in this relationship all along, and there have been things they haven't told each other and things they haven't really admitted to themselves, and everybody's secrets are coming out.
I know. I actually love that. I love that. Actually, I love the idea that they're so close that they sort of, they are like sisters, and the relationship is very similar, which is that of course you sort of love each other unconditionally until something sort of drives a wedge between you, and
Yeah.
the loyalty to the brother husband is sort of the nature of the conflict, which I think is so well done. So
Thank you.
Brava. I want to talk about sort of this is this dysfunctional family, Megan. People always ask, right? Like, how did you learn about how did you sort of come up with this being your shtick? Do you want to
Mhm.
share that with us? I'm sure you come from a perfectly normal family, because those of us that come from normal families are the ones that write the weird ones. But
Yeah.
tell us about that. Where does that interest come from?
Well, I think like after I finished The Family Plot, which was my third novel, I started referring to my first three novels as my bad parenting trilogy, because there are models for bad parenthood in all of those. But I always talk about how I think I'm not a parent myself. Well, I have a stepson, but he's like older, so I didn't actively raise him. Um, but I am very interested in the way that our society puts so much pressure on parents to be a certain way and to look like a certain thing and to be perfect and to put their kids into the right schools and get them at this mile marker at this point and all of that. And I've always thought it was really interesting to look at like, what is the opposite of that? What happens when you don't fit that societal idea. And so I've created parents in my first three books in particular that just really messed up their kids in a lot of different ways. And the other thing, the other reason I think I'm really drawn to that, to dysfunctional families, is that it just creates a lot of great childhood trauma for the characters that then can manifest in adulthood, where their story starts, or where their story that I'm writing starts, in a lot of interesting ways. So, I think, and now like so I've sort of been challenging myself with Thicker Than Water and the book I'm writing now to look at like, how can also like a seemingly normal childhood mess you up a little bit too? Like, what are the things there that put certain beliefs into your head that then
Right.
need to be unwritten? So yeah, I mean, I just love exploring all like the dark, juicy conflict in family, because there's so much there, and all the things that we want to say about relationships and explore about that, it's all within family dynamics of some kind.
Yeah, because and the funny, your family isn't chosen. So, right? I mean, some of it is you have chosen family, but your family of origin isn't chosen. And you have these things that sort of instinctively ingrained in us, the way we react to our parents and our siblings. And I find that super interesting. Do you have siblings?
Yes, I have one sister.
Yeah, and I think I'm the oldest of four, and even there's a big gap between us, and even the way my parents were with my baby brother is so different than how they were with me. And we're all we are all, of course, the result of different types of parenting. So I thought
Yeah.
that is super interesting. And this is your this is your sweet spot, this sort of just the dysfunctional family, but also these familial relationships. I mean, you do, the idea that you're sort of stuck together. You're stuck with each
Yeah.
other. These two women, even if they, Julia and Sienna, even if they, sort of decide they don't agree, they're still totally bound by Jason. And their lives are really different, right? Because I mean, Julia has Aiden,
Yep.
and that's her son, who's an adult, and he plays into it as well.
Yeah.
And so I love all the sort of different layers of that. So tell us, how do you sort of, what's your process like? Are you obviously were thinking about this book while you were writing the last book. So is that sort of normal for you, or do you usually sort of finish a project and then think, okay, now I got to come up with an idea for the next one? Or are you one of those people who has like a book of ideas? In which case this interview might be over. I'm just kidding.
I definitely have a notes app of ideas, but they are incoherent and things I jot down in the middle of the night and things I think are brilliant. And then it's just like they go to a cabin and something happens. And I'm like, okay, cool. there's half a
Yeah.
setting. So when I get to the end of a project, I sort of my mind starts kind of like wandering to the next thing, but nothing super concrete. But then once I have a premise that I'm really excited about, and I pretty much know who the characters are, I always have to figure out what the ending is going to be.
Yeah.
Like I always need to bookend it with the beginning and the end. And then once I know those two things, I figure out, okay, well, what is going to be the middle of this story? What is going to be the midpoint twist or reveal or discovery that sends the characters whirling in a new direction? And then once I have those three main things, I kind of fill in from, okay, from the beginning, I have to go from here. What needs to happen to get to that midpoint?
Mhm.
And then from the midpoint, what needs to happen to get to the ending? And of course, that makes it sound so much easier than
I
it
know.
is.
Right, of
It's
course.
really like a torturous process that takes a long time. But yeah, so that's my process. And I do a lot of outlining. I outline the whole thing, and then I outline right before I write each chapter, I outline the chapter.
Wow. Okay.
I'm definitely a plotter.
I love that. I know. I'm envious of plotters. Yeah, I don't know how to do that, but I think that makes total sense to me. So you're building structure, right, with the three pillars basically, and then you sort of bring the pillars together on each
Yeah.
end. That makes sense. And how long does that process of, sort of like once the beginning and the end, how long does it take you before you're sort of actually ready to write the book?
It can be anywhere from like a few weeks to a couple of months, I think,
Hmm.
depending on how panicked I feel by the need to submit materials to my publisher and try to,
Right.
get the next book contract and all of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like even though I'm a huge plotter and all of that, and I do so much planning ahead of time, I still discover so much in the drafting process. And like I always feel like I don't really know my characters at all until I start writing them. And so in that way, like the beginning, it sort of like comes out in a rush and I can do that fairly quickly. But then as I'm like, okay, that's all I really knew about these people. Now I have to really get to know them.
Yeah.
It starts to go a little slower. And then, so yeah, I kind of drifted from your question, I think.
No, I think the idea is like it's just it takes as long as it takes probably.
Yeah.
And then, and like you said, if the deadlines are looming, then you spend more out, you're up later kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that makes total sense to me. I love the idea that your agent planted the seed that she has a wish list and you're like, okay, I'm just going to tackle one of these wish lists. How do ideas normally come to you?
It's usually like a what if scenario. It's usually a what if question, which I know happens with a lot of writers. Like, you can be looking at like a normal scene, like a kid's birthday party that's happening as you're driving by, and then you're like, what if a strange family suddenly showed up to this birthday party and swore they knew the family, but they had no idea who they were. I don't know. I'm making that up off the top of my head. So, but
Right.
so something that comes in like that, like an interesting question that then like I can't stop thinking about, like that is usually where ideas come from. With my last book, The Family Plot, that I have to credit my husband because we were actually he was trying to help me title something else I was working on that just would not have a name. And I was like, I want something that speaks to the family aspect. So like something that leans toward that. And so he just came up with the first family related phrase he could think of and said The Family Plot. And I was like, no, that doesn't work for this at all. But that is a great title.
Totally.
And then that was worming through my head for days. And then suddenly like the premise of that book just leapt in there. And I like ran into the bathroom while he was brushing his teeth and screamed it at him. And he was like, I don't know what's happening.
Right.
So
Right.
usually it's the like kind of like, oh, what if, and then that grows.
Mm-hmm.
But then sometimes my agent, I guess, says something and that sticks, and sometimes my husband says something and that sticks.
Sometimes it's just like a little firecracker. That's the way we love it, right?
Yeah.
And so when, as you're doing the writing, are sounds like you also have a full-time job. So how do you fit, or, at least you're working for sure outside your books. How do you sort of
Yeah.
schedule your life in order to sort of make all of this work?
Yeah, so I actually I was teaching full time until a couple of years ago. I stopped teaching so that I could try to write full time and see what that would be like, which so far has worked out. But while I was teaching, it was definitely like it was just kind of I had to fit it in whenever I had a pocket of time. And luckily, I was pretty lucky in that my teaching schedule was mostly in the afternoons, so that I would have like an hour and a half maybe in the morning that before I needed to get ready, before I needed to do anything else, I could have just for writing. And like that seems like a not that long of a time, and it's not, but there was something that was oddly freeing in that to me that would help me get more done, because I kind of had this mindset like, well, it's only an hour and a half, so anything I do is going to be a win because I can't be that productive in an hour and a half. And
Right.
somehow like that freed me to just like go. And then I feel like I used to be more productive in that hour and a half than I am now when I basically have the whole day.
Isn't that
um
true? I think that is a real thing. Absolutely. It's like doing the writing sprints. People talk
yeah,
about those,
yeah.
where you just like, and I do that where I just set a timer for 15 minutes. I really have, I real, and I like, you can, if you just refuse to do anything other than move your
Hmm.
fingers on the keyboard for 15 minutes, you can get a lot done. And I'm with you. If I have all day, it takes me all day. And
Yeah.
if I have, 2 hours, then I can do at least as much or sometimes more in those two
Hmm.
hours, which is
Yeah.
so crazy.
Yeah, it's
So
really counterintuitive, but
it totally
it's
is counter.
yeah.
So I'm curious about Julia and Sienna. Did one of them sort of emerge sort of more fully formed in your head?
um I actually I always think of Julia and Sienna as like two very distinct sides of myself, which
Uh-huh.
is that Julia represents the side of me that is like completely non-confrontational, terrified of conflict, like won't say certain things, won't speak up sometimes because I'm like, I don't want to rock the boat and all that. And then Sienna represents the very different side of myself that is like, well, no, I'm going to claim my space and I am going to speak and I'm going to speak up and I'm going to say what I need to say. And if there's any kind of like injustice that happened, I'm going to rage against that and I'm going to talk about that. And so, like, those are both in me at the same time, which is strange because they're so opposite. And so I thought it would be an interesting, like almost self exercise, like therapeutic thing for myself to separate those and give them to these two women. And in that way, they sort of complement each other and they are able to like account for the things the other's flaws. And like, so when Julia doesn't speak up, Sienna speaks for her. When Sienna starts to steamroll things and get a little out of control, Julia calms her down. But I wanted to see, like, part of the journey of the book is both of them finding the other side of that thing for them, but also finding a balance, like where is the space where my voice is the most impactful and I'm comfortable in that space. And like it was kind of like seeing what is that for myself too, in writing that. So because I felt so connected to both of those women in that way, I feel like they were the easiest main characters I've ever written in terms of like just knowing who they are. And Sienna in particular was really, I don't want to say, I mean, I said it easy, it's never easy, but
Right,
Sienna
right.
in
We
particular
yeah.
was just came to me the most complete, I think, because she's a lot of the things that I keep myself from saying sometimes. And so she was a way to push that out, which was really nice. But yeah, so I felt like they came more naturally to me than any other character I've written, maybe.
Yeah, that's so interesting because of course I think people do sort of say, well, which character is you, or is the mother here your mother, or all those things.
Yeah.
You're like, no. But I mean, I do think that there's probably a little of us in all of our characters,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But to sort of think of it that way, because they are really different women.
Mhm.
And I think that is, that's an interesting, and if Sienna is fun and feisty, and you
Mhm.
certainly wouldn't want to fight with her. I mean, I
Right.
can, and I think that, her personality probably makes, Julia more reserved, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the way sort of the dynamics with sisters works, or the dynamic with friends, right? If we have friends who are super outspoken, then we tend to be sort of quieter and shyer around them,
Yeah.
which I think that's totally natural.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
well, that is, I mean, so that is really fun. And then, it's interesting too, this idea of, this man in this place where no one can speak to him, and and Aiden, I mean, and the process for Aiden, because I have, sort of grown children, they're 23 and 21, and the idea that he is seeing his dad in this light too was really, I thought, beautifully done. The idea
Yeah,
that,
thank you.
that he's like, I mean, you looking at your parent and thinking, did he do this sort of horrible thing?
Mhm.
So brava, nicely
Thank you.
done. I
Yeah,
really enjoyed it.
I really wanted to like talk about that thing where I mean we see this all the time when even like public figures are accused of something, and people who have worked with them are like, no, 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 like that could not be the case. And but like coming when you're removed from it, you're like, well, why couldn't that be the case? Like I
Right.
but so I wanted to look at that in the context of this really close family of what is that like when the person that you believe is sort of the rock of your family is maybe not the great person that you believe that they were.
Right. And how, and I mean, in an environment like high school, the impact of that on a child is
Hmm.
the conflict that happens then for for Julia, the mother, is also, so, the stakes are so much higher, right? Because
Hmm.
your kid is going to people are going to believe one thing or the other. And, children aren't very kind about how they express, what they think about things. So it was, Aiden's struggle felt very genuine and real. And I appreciate that. I think it complicates the whole thing even more, right?
Mm. Yeah,
So
thank
that
you.
medical coma, I mean, that's the perfect place to put that guy, like
Yeah.
he can't defend himself. So
Hmm.
can you tell us, so I know this is the thing I always feel bad about, like I'm like, okay, we love that book, now what's next? Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on?
Yeah, so right now I'm working on, it's currently titled, who knows what it'll eventually be called, Cross My Heart. And it's about a woman who becomes romantically obsessed with the husband of her heart donor after she had a heart transplant, even as rumors are swirling that he might have had something to do with his wife's premature death. And she is not even supposed to know that he is the husband of
Right.
her heart donor, but she knows a lot of things and she's good at finding things out. So it's a little she's definitely like a little unhinged, but she also has this like heart of gold, no pun intended.
Right.
Um and so she's a really fun character to write, and it's going to be, I think, my like twistiest, potentially darkest yet, which is saying a lot for me with the
Yeah.
darkness. So I'm really excited about it. I mean, I'm still in the trenches of it very
Right.
much,
Right.
but yeah, that's what's ahead.
Well, that's a great premise. And
Thank
I
you.
think, I speaking of darkness, obviously I'm a big fan of darkness. My books are also very dark. So, what do you think? Like, I think people sometimes say, at least they did to me when I started, and I've been doing this for 20 years, and people would look at me and be like, how can somebody so sweet write such dark stuff? Or, why does, as a woman, aren't you sort of, doesn't it make you recoil to write such dark stuff? And so, what do you think? Where does the darkness come from? Why do we write like that?
Yeah, I always get that comment too of like, you look so sunny and cheerful here, but in here, um, yeah, I think that we are dark on the page so we can be sunny and cheerful in life. And
Mhm.
that is a place to put all of that fear, I think, is what it is a lot of times in these scenarios. And also it's a place to validate our fears, I think, because especially as women, like we live with a lot of possibilities that men don't.
Mhm.
And to create stories out of that, of these bad things that can happen, It's a way to like sort of honor that truth that this is a more dangerous world for anyone who's not a man. And I think for us to have a safe place of our own creation to explore that is really important.
Yeah, it's like a way of processing it too, right? Of sort
Yeah.
of like figuring out, what the impacts of that are on the women that it happens to and on the
Mhm.
world, and and maybe in some small way of making, growing awareness about it so that maybe someday it becomes less. We'll
Yeah.
see, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, so the Thicker Than Water is out on July 11th.
Mhm.
And that is super fun. And our when you're listening to this, it will be July 13th, and the book is out in the world, and you should go grab your copy. If you are a Megan Collins fan, you will not be disappointed. If you're not yet a Megan Collins fan, now's a great chance to become one. Really enjoyed this, Megan. You are
Thank you.
super talented, and I'm glad I'm not part of your family, or at least in any of your books.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. This is Killer Women with Megan Collins. I'm Danielle Girard, and we will see you next time. Bye.